The cabin of Flight 347 felt like a pressure cooker, even before the boarding door hissed shut. Outside, the Los Angeles sun was a furious orange, bleeding into a smoggy, bruised purple as it reluctantly dipped behind the distant Hollywood hills. The air conditioning hummed, a futile attempt to cool the lingering stale heat that had seeped in from the scorching tarmac. I sank into my seat, 14A, the plush fabric doing little to cushion the subtle undercurrent of unease that seemed to vibrate through the very structure of the plane. My gaze drifted to the elderly gentleman in the seat beside me. He moved with a hesitant, almost fragile grace, his thin shoulders hunched as he wrestled a surprisingly heavy, scuffed leather briefcase beneath the seat in front of him. His hands, gnarled and trembling faintly, clutched the worn handle as if it were a lifeline. He wore a slightly too large, faded tweed jacket and a wide-brimmed hat that cast his face in shadow. But I could still see the deep-set lines around his eyes, a roadmap of worries and untold stories. There was an air of profound weariness about him, a silent testament to a journey far longer than the one ahead. The ground crew finally gave the signal, and the plane began its slow, ponderous taxi, a beast stretching its wings. Then the intercom crackled to life, and Captain Thompson's voice boomed through the cabin. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is your captain speaking. Welcome aboard Flight 347, bound for the magnificent New York City. Expect a smooth ride and an on-time arrival." His words were smooth, practiced, but there was a theatrical flourish to his tone, an almost imperceptible hint of smugness that rubbed me the wrong way. It was the voice of a man accustomed to being in command, perhaps too much so. The engines roared, a deep guttural growl that vibrated through the floor, sending a shiver up my spine. The plane lumbered down the runway, gathering speed with an insistent roar, then lifted off with a sudden stomach-lurching surge. Through the window, the sprawling, glittering tapestry of Los Angeles, a seemingly endless expanse of lights, shrank rapidly, dissolving into the inky blackness of the night sky, replaced by the soft, endless expanse of clouds illuminated by the distant city glow. An hour passed, the cabin lights now dimmed to a soft amber glow, casting long, shifting shadows that danced with the plane's gentle sway. The elderly gentleman, who had been quietly gazing out the window for most of the ascent, had finally drifted into a light sleep, his head resting gently against the headrest, a faint, rhythmic whisper escaping his lips. A flight attendant, with a polite but somewhat practiced smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, approached our row. "Sir," she asked, her voice a little too loud in the quiet cabin, "would you care for a beverage or a snack?" The old man startled. Awake, his eyes blinking rapidly, his face momentarily clouded with deep disorientation. He fumbled for words, a stream of accented English that was thick, disjointed, and difficult to parse. He gestured vaguely at the menu she held, his hands trembling slightly, as if the simple act of pointing was a monumental effort. "Water, please, and a little bread?" He finally managed, his voice a dry, raspy whisper, filled with an almost childlike uncertainty. The flight attendant's smile tightened, a flicker of impatience crossing her features, before she nodded briskly and moved on. My stomach clenched. I watched her, a few rows ahead, lean in conspiratorially with another flight attendant, their heads bent together, quick dismissive glances darting back to our row. A male flight attendant soon joined them, and a shared, knowing smirk passed between the three. The air around us, already heavy with the hum of the engines, now felt thick with an unspoken, uncomfortable judgment, a tangible sense of unease settling into the cabin like a persistent chill. I felt a prickle of dread, a quiet certainty that something unpleasant was about to unfold. What happens next will shock you. Don't miss the rest of this incredible story. Hit subscribe now and join our community. The steady hum of the engines, which moments ago had been a comforting backdrop, now seemed to vibrate with a sinister undertone, amplifying the growing tension in the cabin. A few minutes after the flight attendant's hushed, judgmental exchange, the dreaded crackle of the intercom ripped through the quiet. My breath hitched in my throat. It was Captain Thompson again, his voice now laced with an almost theatrical condescension that grated on every nerve. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his tone dripping with exaggerated patience, "this is your captain speaking. While we are committed to providing excellent service and ensuring a smooth journey for all, I must remind everyone that clear and concise communication is absolutely essential for the efficient operation of our flight, especially when it comes to basic requests for refreshments. We are operating a tight schedule, and any unnecessary delays or misunderstandings affect everyone on board." The words hung in the air like a noxious invisible gas, poisoning the atmosphere. There was no mistaking the target of his thinly veiled sarcasm. My gaze immediately snapped to the elderly gentleman beside me, his already pale face crumpled, flushing a deep, mortified crimson that spread from his neck up to his thinning hairline. He visibly flinched as if he'd been slapped, his frail body seeming to shrink further into the confines of his seat. His eyes, which moments before had held a glimmer of quiet dignity, now darted wildly around the cabin, seeking refuge, finding none. He pulled his hat lower, his trembling hands clutching the worn leather briefcase so tightly his knuckles turned bone white. The shame radiating from him was palpable, a suffocating wave that washed over our immediate area. The whispers began almost instantly, a low, unsettling murmur that snaked through the rows like a venomous serpent. Heads turned, eyes filled with a mixture of pity, discomfort, and outright indignation. A young woman across the aisle gasped softly, covering her mouth with her hand, her eyes wide with shock. A burly man in front of me slowly shook his head, his jaw clenched, a muscle twitching in his temple. The collective mood in the cabin shifted dramatically from sleepy indifference to a palpable sense of shared outrage. It felt as if a cold, unwelcome shadow had fallen over us, chilling the previous warmth of the journey, leaving behind an icy residue of discomfort and quiet fury. The injustice of it burned within me, a fiery knot in my stomach. How could someone in such a position of absolute power, entrusted with the lives and well-being of hundreds, abuse that authority with such blatant cruelty? To publicly shame an elderly, clearly vulnerable man who was evidently struggling with a language barrier was an act of profound cowardice. I felt an overwhelming surge of protectiveness, a desperate, almost physical urge to intervene, to shout something, anything, to break the suffocating silence of humiliation. But my voice caught in my throat, paralyzed by the sheer audacity of the captain's actions and the collective shock that had momentarily stunned the other passengers into inaction. The silence that followed his announcement was deafening, broken only by the incessant hum of the engines and the frantic, almost imperceptible breathing of the old man beside me. His dignity had been shredded openly for all to see, and the weight of that shame was almost unbearable to witness. I wondered if he would ever truly recover from this moment, this public shaming at 30,000 feet, etched forever into his memory. The situation seemed hopeless, but sometimes an unexpected hero emerges. Discover how this story reaches its astonishing conclusion. Subscribe and turn on notifications. The tension in the cabin was no longer a mere undercurrent. It was a palpable entity, a suffocating blanket woven from outrage and the lingering sting of the captain's cruel words. Every tick of the clock felt like an eternity, the silence punctuated only by the relentless hum of the engines and the nervous coughs of agitated passengers. The elderly gentleman beside me remained huddled, his face a mask of profound shame, his shoulders trembling almost imperceptibly. I felt a knot of anger tighten in my chest, a desperate longing for something, anything, to break this oppressive atmosphere. Then, from the first-class cabin, a figure emerged, He wasn't rushing, wasn't yelling, but his presence seemed to cut through the heavy air. He was a tall man, perhaps in his late 50s, impeccably dressed in a dark, understated suit that bespoke quiet confidence rather than ostentation. His silver hair was neatly combed, and his posture was ramrod straight, exuding an almost regal calm. There was an unmistakable aura of authority about him, not the bombastic kind of Captain Thompson, but a deep, ingrained power. He moved with a deliberate, unhurried grace, his gaze fixed on the cockpit door. A flight attendant, startled, moved to intercept him, her hand gently extended in a gesture of polite inquiry. He simply met her gaze, offered a brief, firm, yet polite shake of his head, a silent, unmistakable signal that he was not to be deterred. He continued his measured walk, his footsteps firm and resolute, before disappearing behind the heavy curtain that separated the cabin from the flight deck. A collective, almost imperceptible gasp rippled through the rows, a fragile ripple of hope igniting in the stifled air. The next few minutes stretched into an eternity. Passengers exchanged bewildered glances, whispers fluttering through the cabin like nervous butterflies. What was happening? Had he gone to complain? Would anything even come of it? Just as the suspense threatened to become unbearable, the intercom crackled to life again. My breath caught in my throat, and I gripped the armrest. This time the voice was profoundly different. It was calm, resonant, and utterly devoid of the previous pilot's arrogance. "Good afternoon, everyone," the voice began, clear and steady, filling every corner of the cabin. "This is David Miller. I am the owner of this airline." A collective gasp, louder this time, swept through the cabin, followed by an immediate stunned silence. The implication was immediate, electrifying. This wasn't just another passenger. This was the man at the very top. The weight of his words landed with a profound impact. "I want to extend my deepest and sincerest apologies for the utterly inappropriate and unprofessional remarks made earlier by the captain." His voice, though calm, carried an unmistakable edge of steel, a quiet force that brooked no argument. "That behavior is not only unacceptable, but it is a direct contradiction of the values that our company stands for, and our unwavering commitment to treating every single passenger with the utmost respect and dignity." He paused, letting his powerful words sink in, allowing their full weight to settle over the cabin. Then his voice softened, gaining a touch of genuine warmth and empathy. "We understand that travel can be a challenging experience, sometimes confusing, often stressful. Our crew is here to assist everyone with patience, understanding, and kindness. Every individual on this aircraft, regardless of their background, their language, or any other characteristic, deserves to be treated with compassion and respect." He then addressed the elderly gentleman directly, his voice imbued with profound regret. "To the passenger who was inadvertently put in such an uncomfortable and humiliating position, I offer my profound apologies. Your comfort, your well-being, and your dignity are absolutely paramount to us, and we deeply regret that you had to experience anything less than that." The old man next to me slowly lifted his head, his face still a little pale, but the crushing weight of shame seemed to visibly lift from his slumped shoulders. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips, and a glimmer of relief, like a tiny, fragile spark, ignited in his tired eyes. A wave of applause, hesitant at first, then growing in strength and volume, erupted through the cabin. It was a powerful, spontaneous outpouring of collective relief, a profound vindication for the elderly man, and a deep appreciation for Mr. Miller's courage and integrity. The tension that had gripped us for so long finally broke, replaced by a sense of shared calm and renewed hope. The captain's voice was not heard again for the remainder of the flight. As we finally began our descent through the thick cloud cover, the sprawling, glittering tapestry of New York City appearing below us like a million scattered diamonds, a palpable sense of camaraderie settled over the cabin. Upon landing, as passengers began to deplane, I saw Mr. Miller standing near the How exit, personally greeting each passenger with a warm, genuine smile. When the elderly gentleman reached him, Mr. Miller extended his hand, grasping the old man's trembling one firmly, and spoke to him quietly, his words gentle and sincere, offering another heartfelt apology. The old man nodded slowly, his eyes shining with a quiet gratitude. It was a small, intimate gesture, but in that moment it spoke volumes. The owner's unexpected and decisive stand had not only salvaged the dignity of one passenger, but had transformed a moment of public humiliation into a powerful, unforgettable display of genuine leadership. It was a stark reminder that true authority lies not in barking orders or wielding power indiscriminately, but in embodying empathy, compassion, and courageously standing up for what is right, even when it's difficult. The entire experience left an indelible mark on me, a deep understanding of the fragile balance between power and respect, and the profound impact one act of kindness and integrity can have on countless lives. What an incredible reminder of the power of standing up for what's right. If this story resonated with you, imagine the others we have to share. Subscribe to our channel for more real-life dramas and inspiring moments.